So we're just recording from now. So welcome everybody to another Zoom for our landlords, which will now be known as residential rental providers. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. We haven't done one of these for a while. I'm Rayner. I'm one of the directors here at First National Rayner, and we have Ebony, who's one of our property managers.
Hi, everybody.
Chris and Demi and Taryn from the rental department. Taryn's also our accounts person at Rayner First National, and she will be monitoring. Down the bottom, guys, there's a chat box. If you've got any questions, just pop them in there during the session, and Taryn will just monitor that, and we will we'll get to the questions. If there's anything pressing while we're talking about a certain topic, she'll interrupt, but otherwise we'll leave them till the end and answer any questions that you might have. So we might just get started. So welcome everybody. You probably are all aware that there's lots of media surrounding these new changes that are coming in on the 29th of March. So we're a couple of weeks away now. Our whole property management team went into Crown last week. First National had a full day training on all these changes. We had Leah Calnan from the REIV who took our day, and it was a full day training on the 130 amendments to this Act. So it's a lot to know, but what I did want to say at the start is that the media are all over this at the moment and making it sound a lot worse than it actually is. So I just wanted to make sure that you guys are not okay. We're under control at Rayner First National. We know what we're doing, and you won't be dumped with all these changes, and it is really is not as bad as the media is portraying at the moment. Yes, there are some changes and there are some things that you guys are going to be responsible to do. However, most of the changes we have 2 years to get done. So it's not all going to happen on the 29th of March. So don't panic, and just be comforted by the fact that, you know, we know what we're doing, and we're certainly not afraid to find out if we don't know.
And we actually felt really good about, once we left the training in Melbourne, we all were surprised about how good we actually felt after it, because it was a bit of a relief, you know, once we got clarification over certain things that we heard in the media, the same as you guys. It was really refreshing to know, you know, that it isn't as bad as what it sounds, and the legislation hasn't changed since 1997. So we're definitely due for a few changes and things, so you'll find.
I think that was when you say that there's 130 changes, it sounds a lot, but yeah, if you take into account we haven't had changes, Eb, for 25 years or nearly 25 years. I mean, it's not. You know, times have changed. We've moved on from being able to just call anything a rental property. So you know, it covers you guys too. These changes cover you guys as well, to make sure that we're all protected in that. In this. So firstly, we just want to talk about, there's some new terminology, Eb, that we need to get our heads around, and so just go through those.
So I don't know who was sitting in this boardroom, but they decided that we can no longer call landlords and tenants. So the new word for landlord is a residential rental provider, and tenants are called renters. And a lease is called a rental agreement. Now, you're not going to be slapped on the hand if you accidentally call a tenant or forget to call them a renter or anything like that, but more for informal sort of settings and emails and things like that, that's what they will be referred to. So I don't know why. I don't know. I don't have the answers on that, but that is what they believe needs to be changed. So here we are.
So in this new amendments, it covers changes to 5 main areas of the new tenancy and leasing, changes in tenancy, an end of rental agreement, gas and electricity serving, and some other changes including pet agreements and things like that. So they're the 5 categories that we're covering. But as I mentioned before, there's no changes that are needed straight away, and there's no changes to existing tenancies. Is that correct?
Yes.
So any new tenancies, these new changes need to be in by, and we've got 2 years to complete the rest of them.
Yeah, so essentially, when a property becomes vacant or you're putting a new property on the market, if it's owner occupied, it just needs to meet those standards straight away before you put a new tenant in there. But if you've got a tenant who's been in there for 2 years and, you know, they're a long-term tenant and things like that, you don't need to, by next week, you know, get the electricity, like the electrical check and gas check and all that sort of stuff. You've got the 2 years to do so. Even though we are being proactive and trying to encourage our landlords to do it sooner rather than later, you're not under that time frame. But if your property becomes vacant in that time, then your property manager will just give you a call, and then you'd go over what needs to be done for your property. You might not need all of it. You might only need, you know, to update a couple of things. And then we've found as well, like, really the standard that they're implementing, I can't think of any property on top of my head that doesn't meet that standard in Bacchus Marsh. It's, you know, you're more thinking toward like the older properties in Melbourne and things like that, you know, one of the standards is they have to have a connecting toilet to like a, like, I just thought that all properties had that, but yeah, the standard is what we all have anyway. So
I think probably with those, those standards, you would be aware if there was any of your properties that already didn't meet these. I feel like that
well, it's kind of our standard anyway, like what they and that's what we kind of felt really relieved when we went to the training, because we didn't know what we're going to go into, and obviously the media had taken over and things like that. And when we went in there and they were going through a lot, and like one of them was, you know, the toilet and, you know, having hot water to taps and things like that. I mean, as you all know, like we have that in majority of our properties, and if we didn't, you know, we'd be noting that down and coming to you during the routine inspections and things like that and saying, look, I don't believe this is up to our standard. So yeah, obviously our standard is a bit different to those, you know, in Victoria.
So I think one of the big ones is probably that's changed a little bit, although I was talking to Taryn today and she said there's already a gas one in check anyway, but your gas and electricity safety checks have to be done every 2 years. Is that correct?
Yes, by a qualified tradesman. Yeah. So we're in the process at the moment, which you'll get more information about, but we're having meetings and stuff like that with local tradesmen and things, and negotiating a deal for our landlords and things like that, and going through exactly what is required when they go out and test the electrical and things like that, and just sort of working out the smoothest process for our landlords, tradesmen, tenants and everything. But yeah, that's what's happening at the moment.
I just have a question that's come through. What if you have a long-term tenant of 2+ years and they didn't sign the lease and they're now on a month-by-month? Would they be treated as a long-term tenant or a new one with a change?
So they're still living in the property. The property needs to become fully vacant. And then, you know, so even if they're living there with a lease or month to month, they're still living in the property. So you still have that 2 years. It's when it becomes fully vacant and then fully vacate is when the property manager will then have that conversation with you and get the property before you put another tenant in there.
However, if that tenant is still there within 2 years, it needs to be done within 2 years anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. So, sorry, I'm just going to, someone's microphone's on. I'm not quite sure what's happening. Let me just say there. Just a reminder, if you can just mute your microphones if you haven't already. So how is this going to work in terms of procedure, Eb? So will you be looking for things like this, even if the property is tenanted, looking for things like this during your routine? So if there's something you become aware of in routines that it doesn't meet the standards, will you be notifying the landlords then?
Yes, so we already send out a checklist, as some of you may know, to our tenants to sort of have a look at certain things. We're going to be implementing a checklist for our property managers who are going and doing the routine inspections, and it's prompting them to look for, you know, the things that we need to keep up to date. So once we do a routine inspection, it'll be double check that, you know, when's the gas being tested, when's this being tested, you know, certain things, there's certain heights that the range hood needs to be at compared to the oven and things like that. You know, we'll be looking for certain things like that and making sure that they do have, you know, the standards of the toilet and the plumbing and a met and little things like that. So we'll be implementing that for our
One of
property
the things
managers,
that
and they
just-
need to.
Yeah, one of the things that just does come to mind, your windows need to be able to be open and closed. That
Correct.
was one of the things we may have an issue with in Bacchus Marsh, because a lot of the times in older homes, they're painted shut, so you can't open them. So any windows do need to be able to be open and closed, and they need to be able to stay in an open position, I think is the other thing. So that was the one thing that came to mind that may be an issue in Bacchus Marsh.
But it's only, it's kind of like a teething. So
Correct.
we'll have those issues, like the first routine that we go to when we're doing that checklist and things like that. Once we rectify those issues and, notify that everything's up to, it's all compliant.
Yeah.
Moving forward, it's going to be a lot easier. It's just
Correct.
that first inspection that we'll be
Yeah.
doing is,
Yeah.
but we're going to have checklists. So, it's going to be in front of the property manager to check for all those certain things and sign off on that before we send the report off. So that will be
Yeah.
on us.
Yeah, that's right. Now just moving on from that, so that's the changes there. But the other thing we need to do with a new lease or rental agreement is that we need to have a disclosure statement in the lease, or the new tenants need to have a disclosure statement which has quite a few things on it. But things like whether the property has had a homicide in the last 5 years, whether it meets the minimum rental standards, which we'll go through a few of those later, the dates the electricity and gas safety checks were done, all that sort of things. There's quite a few things in there, or whether it's had drug cultivation in it in the last 5 years. So it's the last 5 years, a disclosure statement. It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't rent it out, or that the tenant, they just need to be aware of it, basically.
Yeah, and we're going, again, it's something that we're on to as well. So that's another thing that when they're signing the lease agreement, we're going to be getting them to sign off that they've received that disclosure, and they've received that.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is one of the other changes is about repairs and the additions to urgent repairs. So obviously there's things currently that are considered urgent repairs, and there's a few things added to that list as well. Eb?
Yes, let me just try and find where that is. Where have we put that?
Page 2.
Oh, yes. So firstly, the urgent repairs has gone up from 1,800 and it's now 2,500. And just a reminder that the tenants are actually allowed to engage in those urgent repairs as well. And that includes the same as heating, hot water, burst part, all that sort of stuff is already still on there. They've now added air conditioning to that, so that's now an urgent one. Mold, which we all treat mold as urgent anyway, but and dishwashers are interestingly on that list. So if your property has a dishwasher that breaks down and it's not working, it needs to be treated the same as a heater or anything else. So we've got sort of short-term time frames where we can get that rectified, and we need to sort of action that quite quickly.
And once again, the 1,800 urgent repair figure has been in since 1997. So like it's well overdue.
Prices have gone up.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, the other big one I think the media's been all over is that tenants are going to be able to do whatever they like to your property, and you are not going to be able to do a thing about it. And that's actually not quite the case. Is that right, Eb?
Yeah. So that's one that we all kind of felt really relieved on, and it's all about the wording about it. So the media has really, and we've experienced it. We've had lots of landlords speak to us and say, I'm really nervous and things like that. They can make modifications without consent, which they can do now anyway, really. Like if we were to fight someone putting a picture hook up, like realistically we're not going to win that battle. So it's more just so they can sort of do that, they can put mirrors up, they can install like child safety locks on cupboards and things like that. They don't need to get consent for that, although we are obviously going to encourage that they still do so. But we can't refuse them to do that. Now, in terms of painting and installing veggie gardens and doing all that sort of stuff, they still need to get written consent. We can't unreasonably deny that request. So, you know, I have landlords panicking that, you know, they've got a 3-year-old property and they're worried that their tenants are going to go and paint it hot pink. You know, it's a reasonable deny. Like if they asked for it to be painted hot pink and they wanted to do it themselves and things like that, I mean, you can deny that request. And another thing that we are implementing is, you know, if they were to request to paint the property or whatever it is, we're not just going to go, yes, you can do that or whatever. We're going to set up a request form and they need to fill out details and give us information so you can make an informed decision. So things like what walls are going to be painted, what color are they going to be painted, are you going to employ a tradesman to do it, are you going to do it, what's going to happen if you paint half the house and leave the other half because you just ran out of time to do it and then you end up vacating? So do we hold a bond so we can rectify that issue at the end of the tenancy and things like that? So you know, we're going to be setting up those forms like soon to get that all sorted and things like that. And then when we come to you and say this is their request, this is what they're doing, then, you know, if you don't feel that that is reasonable, then you can, you know, say no. And then if they were to fight that and go to BCAT, you've got that form and you've got a reason as to why you don't want them to go ahead. And the same with veggie gardens and things like that. You know, some things, I think we're talking about, is it potatoes, Leanne, that
Yes, wrecks the soil apparently.
wrecks the soil, which is something that I learned. So, you know, it's little things like that. We ask them, okay, where are you going to put the veggie garden? You know, what are you going to be growing and things like that? And so yeah, it's not just allowing them to do whatever they want, and we're still making sure that we've got those processes in place. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we've got everything in writing, we've got as much information as we can, and yeah, we're not just getting an email saying yes, paint whatever you want.
I think so. Just to be clear, there's 2 types of modifications. There is. I think you sent an ebook out to everybody this week to have a look at. Anyway, I think it's all in there. But there are certain modifications the tenant can do without consent. We're going to obviously encourage them to still get consent, so we know what's going on, and it's not a shock when we do a routine that, you know, they've put picture hooks everywhere. But and then there's another list that you can't reasonably, and then again, that's the wording, reasonably refuse. Doesn't mean you can't refuse it. It just means you've got to have a reason why, you know. So obviously you don't want them to paint a wall that's in a brand new house. Like, that's just ridiculous and not necessary. So, and I don't think, that's not unreasonable. So things like that. Just on that, at the end of the tenancy, do they need to then reverse the modifications?
Good question.
I'll answer it because I have the answer. I was just throwing to you to track. Yes, they do. So they do have to reverse the modifications or pay the landlord to reverse them, unless it's otherwise, unless you come to an agreement together. So anything that they put in the wall, they need to remove it before they leave, or they need to pay you to remove it. So again, if some people want to put up cameras, security cameras, that's fine, but you need to take it with you and repair the damage of whatever, you know, things like that needs to be.
They also can't, you know, they can install, so they don't have to have the request to install security cameras and things like that. However, they do need to have that written consent, same as painting. If they were to put drill any holes into, is it bricks, Leanne? And
bricks is not, you can't just do it to bricks. And I think sometimes eaves where there may be asbestos in the roof,
correct,
you can't drill into that without consent. Obviously we don't want an asbestos issue, and asbestos is only dangerous if you start mucking around with it. So we don't want them drilling security cameras into eaves that have asbestos in them, because then we have a bigger issue than security cameras. Okay.
Before we move on, I have another question.
Yes.
Just circling back to urgent repairs. The question is, what if you provide a list of your own service providers as a landlord? Will this be provided to the tenant for urgent repairs? Also, what happens if they go outside our service providers?
Is this for urgent repairs only?
Yeah.
Well, We can obviously, if you have, when our landlords select their own plumbers and electricians and stuff like that, we add that as a note in the file and we look for that as well. I'm definitely happy to send that across to the tenant. Also, we send our urgent maintenance numbers to our tenants when they sign up and things like that. Really, they're not going to get, if it's a hot water service, and I mean, you can ask them, and most people would be reasonable as to call your plumber or electrician and things like that. They don't have to go, like they can engage in a plumber or an electrician, whatever. If it was a Sunday afternoon and they knew their neighbor across the road was a qualified plumber, really they can engage in that person. It would be nice if they engaged in our plumbers and your plumbers, but really
for an urgent repair,
if they went ahead with it, I mean, there's no really leg to stand on. They still rectified an urgent issue with a qualified tradesman.
Yeah. We might just jump ahead from the list, Eb, to the minimum rental standard. So there's 130 minimum rental standards we were talking about before. Things like a toilet has to be connected to the sewage system, all that sort of stuff. Again, different for rural properties where there's septics and stuff like that. So don't panic. Again, with all of these, don't panic. We already got most of these covered. And if we haven't, we'll be talking to you way before they become an issue. So don't worry. So there's a list of minimum rental standards the property must comply to, which I think has been sent out. So I urge you to have a quick look at that. And if you think that your property doesn't meet one, if you want to be proactive and just shoot us an email and say, look, I think this could be an issue in my property. But again, you've got 2 years again to rectify it, or when a new tenant goes in, we're going to be proactive again with during our routines with that.
Again, that's things like, you know, a bathroom has to have a basin. It has to have a shower or a bath. I mean, I've never walked into a rental property that I can think of that doesn't have either one of those. So it's really like the standard, our standard is already there. So you would have already been notified if your property didn't meet these standards. But like I said, it's, you know, about the toilet, and it talks about, you know, the laundry having to have hot water connected as well. So, you know, it's very old school for them. I don't know what era, but that they didn't put hot water taps in laundry. So, and like Leanne said, it's not that you have to buy, you know, as soon as the legislation change doesn't mean you've got a week to rectify. You've got 2 years. So
yeah. The other thing is now when we put a property on the market for sale, if it's got a tenant currently in it, the renter is entitled to compensation for any inspections that we do during the week. So do you have in front of you, Eb, what that actually is?
So it says that the renter is entitled to half a day's rent or $30 per inspection, whichever is more.
Yeah. So the line there is $420 a week. If it's below $420, it would be $30 per inspection.
Correct.
And so it's per inspection, guys, not just per, you know, week.
And you can only do 2 1-hour inspections in a week.
Yeah.
Which, look, again, I mean, I know our sales agents are never expecting any more from our tenants than that. It's more so, you know, a lot of agents who don't work closely with their rental department or don't really care are just taking, you know, multiple people in a week and things like that. And it's more so just I mean, the renters are, you know, they're entitled to enjoy their home and not have people coming in every single day and doing inspections and things like that. And actually, our sales team are absolutely stoked with this because it's giving the renter an incentive to allow them access to go in and do. I can't, you know, so many times they don't want to do it, or they're really pulling teeth to get through, and now they've got compensation for that, so they're more than likely going to allow them in on a Saturday, and it really benefits you guys who need to sell your property as well with a renter in there. Yeah,
that's exactly right. I think that's actually going to be good for us to have. that's definitely, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so 420 is the line there. So it's either half a day if it's over 420 and $30 if it's below 420 a week. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. You got any questions, Taryn, or are you good?
I'm just answering one.
Okay.
The last question was, how long do we have to give tenants if we need to ask them to terminate the agreement so the landlord can move back into the property, in case it is needed, in case it's needed to happen due to financial situation, work location, etc. Now, I was just writing back, with COVID, it's been a longer process to ask a tenant to vacate, as they've had a memorandum on evictions and vacating. So at the moment, it has to go through Consumer Affairs and VCAT, and there has to be proof of the landlord's hardship or an immediate family member in hardship or, you know, relocation, etc. But that is coming up to end at the end of March at the moment, isn't it, Eb?
Yes.
So hopefully after that it'll go back to normal, and then it will go back to the 60 days plus postage.
Yeah, so it's hard, like Taryn just said, it's a longer process now because of COVID, because we can't exactly give time frames, because you do have to apply to VCAT to even have the matter heard at all before they grant you that 60 days. So, you know, you could be waiting 4 months for a VCAT hearing, and then you've got to provide all that proof that, you know, you are in hardship and things like that. And then once they determine that you are and they're happy to, you know, serve that 60-day notice, then that 60 days counts from the day the member, you know, the day of the hearing, essentially. So yeah, it's a longer process, but hopefully end of March things go back to normal a little bit.
And then the next one is 14 days notice must be given for a renter for an inspection access, and that's actually 24 hours written notice to ask for an inspection with a renter. We have to give them 24 hours written notice for a sales inspection, which usually we like to have something mutual, but if we had to put the hard word on a renter, it's
that's
24
right.
hours written notice.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I think too, the thing is, it has been a little bit more difficult in COVID when we weren't allowed to do open for inspections to get through tenants' properties if they're for sale. But if you're doing opens, I think that's a great way to get the maximum amount of people to go through, and you're not inconveniencing the tenant too much. So yeah, but this, I think this is going to be a really good change for us. So yeah.
I think a lot of it is, in fairness, I think that it's, and all of our landlords, we've got really good landlords, we've got good properties and things like that. So, you know, we really walked out of there and we weren't concerned, really. We felt quite good.
The other thing I want to talk about, just touch on quickly, one of the differences I think the property managers have liked to have in their back pocket is the 120-day vacate notice. That is no longer applicable, so we can't use it anymore. Is that correct?
It's a touchy subject, Leanne. Yes, our 120-day notice for we didn't have to provide any reason at all. If the tenants were to fight it, they'd have no leg to stand on, because you've given them 120-day notice, which is enough time, and you didn't have to justify yourself at all. They've taken that away from us, which is really sad. But I think it again comes down to making sure that your property managers are following procedures and things like that. We've had discussions and meetings about, so there's still the 90-day notice. So to explain that a little bit, if you find a brand new tenant and you sign them on for a 12-month lease, 90 days plus postage before that ends, you can serve a 90-day notice without any reason. So that's why it's super important and for your property managers to be doing the 3-month inspections, a first inspection. So we get an idea of, you know, after that 3-month inspection, if they're really not up to our standard as a tenant, and, you know, they've already fallen behind in rent and it's just not happening, we can serve that 90-day notice and they can be out by the end of their first lease.
So just to reiterate that, I was just going to say, this is the first term of their lease though. So if they've been there for longer than a 12-month, if they're on a 12-month lease and then they re-sign out another lease, we can't use that 90 days. So that's why
you have one opportunity to do this, which is why that 3-month inspection is crucial. And again, I was speaking to someone today about a 6-month, they were talking about a 6-month lease. And, you know, we used to be okay with giving, like, if you wanted just to trial them out and things like that, that was a good way of doing it, is signing them on for a 6-month lease. Now that's not going to work because you've got to serve a 90-day notice before that 6 months end. You're not going to find out by the first, you've got to really serve that 90 days at 2 months, or, you know, you don't even have time to do the 3-month inspection.
Correct, yeah.
You know? So that's why we're going to be really pushing the 12-month, which we do anyway, and majority of our landlords sign 12 months as well. But yeah, we do the 12-month lease. Now it makes it a little bit more difficult for the landlords that have long-term tenants and they're not happy and they're kind of hoping to maybe get them out or something, like, you know, but you've kind of got to have a reason now. So you've got to be selling the property, renovating the property, have proof of all of that. But yeah, but of course, like, if they're breaching their contract, or, you know, they're doing the wrong thing and all that sort of stuff, that they can be served a notice to vacate under all those, you know, breaches and things like that, which is again why it's super important that your property manager is doing routine inspections consistently, keeping an eye on them, checking, you know, rent arrears and all that sort of stuff.
I think when there's no support in a property management department and property managers are stressed out of their brain, the first thing to go, routines are pushed back. And I just feel like now, particularly in your first term of a lease, it's super important to get that through. And a 3-month one particularly just gets pushed out to that 6-month line. And
it's amazing how many people don't do it, and it's
correct.
the most crucial routine that you have.
Yeah, especially now.
Yeah, exactly right. It's our only opportunity to serve that notice. So yeah, it's crucial.
Okay, cool. Any other questions, Taryn? No, has anyone got any other questions that they want to write down?
Actually, I have got one.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm Lynn.
Hey,
Lynn.
What I was going to say is, so I've had a tenant that's been there for like 9 years or something like that. Oh, maybe thereabouts. Yeah, actually, I think he has been there for 9 years. But so his lease has expired now, and he's now month by month. Okay, but I'm thinking, you know, because I'm, you know, 99% retired now, and I'm looking at dabbling at the renovation side of things and then selling it. So, so I can still get in under the 90 day.
Not the 90-day. You can get in under the 60-day notice, which is the landlord renovating or selling. Yeah, so it's 60 days plus postage. But just at the moment, it's due to end the end of March, but that option to apply for that has been completely taken off the VCAT website. So you actually have to apply to VCAT. So my suggestion to you would be just wait until early April to find out if it's going to be extended or they are going to, you know, go back to semi-normal, and then you can speak to your property manager, put it in writing that this is what you want to do. This is the notice you want to serve, and then they can serve it for you.
Right. No, I think normality is possibly not going to be cards. I mean, it all sounds very promising, but I don't think it is, because that's the end of March job. And we will find a certain number of people that no longer have jobs.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been so lucky with our rent roll. When COVID hit this time last year, and we were all up in arms and didn't have any idea what was going on, and we were so worried in property management that was just going to be a nightmare for everybody. And we were very, very lucky. I think we probably had under a dozen that actually applied for hardship, and were on. Would that be fair, Eb? I think.
Yeah.
But
I don't think there's one person on it at the moment.
Yeah,
Or
but
maybe a
Lynn, you
couple.
are right. When JobKeeper completely ends, we are expecting a little bit more of another jump in that. So yeah, we'll just have to see what happens. I mean, yeah, it will be really interesting in so many areas what happens when JobKeeper ends. Yeah.
But with your situation, Lynn, you're still in a position where you can still apply for that. So if you wanted to get the ball rolling, sooner rather than later, I would still be contacting your property manager.
We don't know what's happening, or
Pardon?
you know that we don't know what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, you can still apply to VCAT and have the hearing. You might be waiting 3 months for a hearing, but once you get that hearing in 3 months' time, and say things haven't changed, and we still have to go through that same procedure as what we have been the last 12 months, we have a hearing in 3 months' time.
I don't understand where you have to go through a VCAT hearing if you're just purely selling the property.
Because I don't understand a lot of the things that they're doing, to be completely honest.
I think it's so a lot of landlords, or some landlords would say, okay, I'm just going to say that I'm selling the property to get my tenant out when there's a memorandum on evictions, whereas they're making us go through Consumer Affairs. We have to get a reference number from Consumer Affairs and apply to VCAT, because VCAT will then want the evidence to support the landlord's claim that they are selling or renovating. They'll want the plans, they'll want the sales authority as evidence that that is actually what is happening.
We were talking about that at training last week.
Yeah, sorry.
That's all right. We were talking about that at training last week, and they will be cracking down, I think, on you providing proof of your renovations and that they're major renovations. If things like that, they were talking about that. I was just trying to find it in here what the rules were.
Yeah, you can't just go and get the carpets changed
or the painting done
and the painting done and claim that as a renovation. They're going to be this.
No. But I mean, how do you prove that for a VCAT? For a potential VCAT hearing down the track.
I mean, you don't have to prove it, essentially, like. Exactly. I think it's more so, if you were to serve that notice and then 5 weeks later it was on the rental market again. Yeah.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I do have another question that's come through. It just says, with the new rental laws, can the renter go to VCAT to stop the sale of a property if there isn't a similar property available in the same price bracket or in a similar location?
What was that? Sorry, can you repeat that?
With the new rental laws, can the renter go to VCAT to stop the sale of the property if they can't find a similar property available in the same price bracket or in a similar location?
No, they can't. It's the landlord's right to sell the property, and they've got their own circumstances and things as well. The only thing is, during COVID, if that you were to sell the property and it's sold to an owner occupier and they wanted vacant possession, you'd have to go through that process of serving them the notice. So you'd have to apply to VCAT, serve the 60-day notice and things like that. At that hearing, if the tenant was to claim hardship and all that sort of stuff, they would extend that. So they won't throw them out on the street. They will say, okay, what's a reasonable time frame for you? I've actually had this happen. The tenants lived out with acreage and things like that and had livestock and things. So those properties don't come around often. The landlord had to sell the property. So they did get granted that 60 days and they were happy for it all to go ahead and things like that. However, they just gave the tenant more time to find something else. So they extended that by 6 weeks. And, you know, if they hadn't found something before that extension, then they were able to reapply. But they have to also prove that they were looking. You know, they have to prove to me that, and which they had done. They proved that they were going to open for inspections. They proved that they were getting, you know, knocked back because of how many people were around and things like that. And it was a genuine case that they were trying to find something. So, you know, they can't just say I don't want to vacate and
stop a sale. Yeah.
Yeah.
So they do. So they do give them, like, if it was 6 weeks, then if they still hadn't found anything, they could reapply. Is that what
absolutely?
happened?
Yeah, they could do that. But yeah, they really had to prove that there's a reason why they're not getting it. You know, they have to prove that they are looking and things like that.
Anything else, Taryn? While we're here,
No. Just
want to talk about the major ones again with the electricity and the gas. We're getting some deals together. We'll have a couple of options for our landlords, so that when things become vacant, we can get straight onto that. Or if you want to get the ball rolling, we're happy to do it mid-tenancy as well. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we're going to be try to be as proactive as we can, because we don't want to leave it to, you know, 2 months out of that 2 years, and then all of a sudden the tradesmen don't have enough availability to service all, because I can see how it's going to happen. I know that a lot of agencies and things like that, and they're not going to be proactive with it, which we want to be the complete opposite. We want to get the ball rolling. We want to make sure, and the thing is as well, like, it's not unreasonable to, you know, your property, you want to know for yourself, liability reasons as well, that your property is safe. You want to make sure that there's no gas leaks. You want to make sure that the, you know, the safety, they've got children in the house and things like that, and you've got unsafe electrical. I mean, that's a disaster waiting. Like, you don't want that either, and we don't want that. So yeah, we're working, we're setting up meetings with local tradesmen that we use quite frequently, and we're setting up deals and things like that for you guys. So we'll come out with a PDF of different options as well, so you don't have to go with, and then if you want to engage in your own qualified electrician or gas plumber, more than happy to organize that for you. Just send us their details, we'll book that in, but we'll come to you guys with a deal, and you essentially just tell us which one you want to go with, and we will do the rest on our end. But yeah, I think it's a good thing.
I have one more question. Can a tenant request the electricity and gas checks instead of waiting for the landlord to take action, even during a term of their lease?
If they've got a genuine reason as to, if they've got a concern about a gas leak or something like that, of course they can request it. Like I said, they're allowing you that 2 years to get it done. So yeah, I mean, they can of course request anything, but like that, you have to, again, you can't unreasonably deny that request. So if they were concerned about something, then I would be highly recommending getting that done.
I do think I remember something, and don't quote me on this. I will write this down to ask. We've actually got another session with the RAIV on Thursday afternoon. So if you guys think of any questions in the meantime, just email them through to us and we will ask Aaliyah at the RAIV. It was just a follow-up session. We've got a few questions about procedural stuff that we want to ask her. But if you think of anything after tonight's session, just email it through and we'll ask her and get back to you. I do remember saying, if you get one of the electrical or gas out to do a safety check and there needs to be work, you've got 14 days to fix it. Is that right, Eb?
Correct.
You don't have 2 years. You can't just ignore it then for 2 years. If you know about it, you do have to get it fixed. Yeah,
correct. If it's not compliant, and you've got to I mean, it can't be the tenant that determines if that's not compliant.
No.
They can raise their concern, and you know, you can act on that. But once the tradesman goes out there, and you know, if there's no safety switch or you know, something like that, or there's a gas, whatever it is, you do have 14 days to rectify that issue. And again, if you don't, then it becomes a more serious issue.
That's right. So basically, once you know about it that there's an issue, you can't wait the 2 years to get it fixed. You need
correct.
To get,
yes, you've got right. 2 years to engage in that. Engage in the electricity check and things like that. But yeah, you've got a time frame to get it actually fixed once you've been known that's not compliant.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good job. Any
That's
other
it.
questions?
Okay. So we do encourage you to have a look at that ebook, guys, like we've sent it out to you. So have a look through it yourselves. I mean, we're going to be doing the best. Obviously, we're all learning. It's all new to us as well. We have done lots of training on it. We spent 6 hours in a room in Crown last Thursday and still didn't get it finished. So there's lots of questions, and there'll be questions that pop up as we move along as well, I'm sure, and probably changes as well that they haven't thought of, the government haven't thought of either. So
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be other things that do pop up, but please just send us any questions through. We'll do our best to get them answered for you and get it back to you. So thanks for joining us tonight. I hope that's relieved your fears a little bit. As I said, we were pleasantly surprised that it was we were really worried about going in thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to work? But I think it's going to be fine. And as I said it before, it protects you, it protects us, and it protects the tenants. I think it's going to be good changes.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so
Have
much,
a good
everybody.
night, and we'll chat to you soon. See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.